I wanted to ask you about your experiences in Japan as
Okay.
president of Universal Studios operations there. You were
hmm
developing all of the company's real estate throughout the Pacific Rim, which
hmm
is certainly, to put it mildly, no small area. What were some of the real estate developments that you worked on, and in particular, some of the more memorable ones for Universal?
Yeah. So my primary role was to build out a network of movie theaters. Right. That's and there are a lot of reasons why I was doing that in the 1990s that we don't need to get into now. It's too deep into the weeds. But what I did was build. I went to Japan or arrived in Japan at the very beginnings of a massive economic recession, and I I had two major benefits going into such a massive economy that was going through such a big downturn. One, I just raised a $400 million budget. Right, that's in early 90s dollars. So that was when 400 million, meant something. It's kind of a joke thing. And then the other thing that I had that was a huge advantage was my business card had two super prestigious logos on it: Universal Studios and Paramount Studios. So I had the advantage of being considered a very young. I was in my late 20s, being very young, which was unusual, in an extremely senior position, working for major organizations with an enormous amount of money in my pocket during a recession. Right, so you can see all these things came together and made it a lot of fun. And probably the biggest, you asked me about projects, but I'm going to share with you something a little bit different, if I may, Nick, if you don't mind. So I did some very, very big projects. I built entire entertainment centers. I built multi-story buildings or contributed to the building of those in order to be able to get my assets into them. And one of the things that I learned, it was the art of negotiation. And the reason for that is that in Japan there is, I don't know if there, but it probably still is, but there certainly was in those days. There was a system that was called dango, and dango, what that means is basically no negotiation. So when I went into a town and brought in the 3-4 major general contractors that we were able to use, they would quite literally sit in, and I know this because I actually sat in one of these meetings at one point. They would sit in a meeting and agree to who it was that was going to be doing my project. So I would send out bid docs originally, very early on. Here, I want to get bids from you. And 3 of them would come back really high, and 1 would be about right. Right? It's like it was a game. They had predetermined who it was that was going to be my contractor. So there was no bidding. So what I had to do instead, and I just figured, all right, that's the way it works. I'm not trying to bang my head against the wall. We're going to do it differently. And so what I ended up doing to mitigate this problem was what's called, in England anyway, quantity surveying. And that means that we conducted a study that analyzed every single line item that would be necessary in building these massive projects. You can imagine how big these were. And we would assess what market rate was for each line item. And then I would go into a negotiation with the selected contractor and just figure out who that was very early on so as not to waste time messing about with a bid system that I knew was futile. And we would sit down and we would negotiate on a line item basis until we got to a price that we felt was fair and that they thought was fair. So to give you, one more point on that. So to give you an example, I remember specifically seeing the steel costs in one particular bid that we got, or one line item proposal that we got from a winning contractor that was out of whack with where we expected it to be. And so we negotiated with them and we found out why they thought it was going to be so expensive. And we assisted them in finding a way to get the steel for us for a significantly lower price. So it taught me to be extremely detailed in terms of bidding or looking at bids, and also the value of bringing value to your contractors. Find out what their pain points are. No one's perfect. What are their struggles? Where do they have difficulties? And then seek out ways of resolving those problems, not only for that, not only because it benefits you, but also because it benefits them as well and makes them a better supplier to you. So that was the big lesson, I think, in this context that I would say I had there.